All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. This is Adam Fishman, the Executive Director of American Friends of Likud, and we welcome you to our continuing briefing series, Insider Briefing Series, and we're very excited to have with us from Israel HaYom, Ariel Kahana. As you can see from the background behind me, and of course my white shirt, that we are on the eve of Yom HaZikaron, and moving right into Yom HaAtzmaut. I encourage you, those who haven't heard the very brief podcast, audio podcast that is on our website from last year's Yom HaAtzmaut, when we were all in Bidud, and we were all in quarantine and could not leave our homes. It's about a 7 or 8 minute podcast that I put together about our feelings here in Israel, what it means to be in Israel on these days of Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut. But without further ado, I am going to hand it off to Sarah Beiser to introduce our speaker, and then we will get to the briefing and, of course, your questions. Sarah?
Ariel, thank you for joining us this afternoon, early evening. Ariel Kahana is the Senior Diplomatic Correspondent for Israeli HaYom, Israel's most widely circulated and read newspaper. In this position, Ariel leads the paper's coverage of the Prime Minister, both at home and abroad. Ariel accompanies the Prime Minister on his travels to the United Nations, the United States, and around the world. Ariel also covers the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Israel's relations with the Jewish diaspora. Ariel started his career as a journalist in 1997 as the anchor and the Knesset reporter for Arutz Sheva, Channel 7. After nearly 10 years at Arutz Sheva, he left to become the economic correspondent and eventually editor of the daily edition at Makor Rishon. Ariel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Adam, and shalom, everyone. Yes, it is here. It's very, I would say, unique moments before the beginning of the Memorial Day of Yom HaZikaron. You know, we are quite divided nation and country, but probably those are, I mean, Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day and Memorial Day are probably the only 2 days we are more or less united. So Adam and I discussed the topics I will begin with, and let's try to do it quickly. So first of all, I think we should open about what's happening with Iran. Actually, we have quite significant and I would say even buzzing developments even in the last hour. Just now it was reported that an Israeli ship was attacked by Iran probably a few days ago. It was reported in Lebanon, a channel related to Hezbollah, but in any case, it looks like there was another event of attack by Iran on Israeli owned ship, and that is reported just, I would say, 1 hour after Iran announced, and this is a very, very problematic development. Iran announced that it will enrich uranium for the level of 60%. And that's something that never happened in the Iranian nuclear program, never. In the worst days before the JCPOA, so I'm talking about 2014, 2013, and so they were enriching to 20%. And now they're jumping to 60%. We do not have yet the numbers, I mean, which central firms they're going to use and what's going to be the amount, but at least symbolic, it's a very problematic development, and of course it's a message for us and for the US and the entire international community. And that announcement by Iran comes after Israeli officials leaked to international media that Israel is responsible to the attack that took place on Sunday, if I'm not wrong, on Sunday in Natanz, and maybe later we'll into the question why it was leaked. I'm not sure it was that smart, but in any case, what you can see is a serious escalation between the parties, and all that happened when just yesterday. Secretary of Defense, American Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, ended his visit here, about 24 or 30 hours visit here in Israel. It was the first official and public visit representative from the Biden administration here in Israel. We are more than 3 months after the new administration began its term, and it's the first visit. I must say, as far as you know better than me probably, but I understand that this administration, because of the corona, they are not traveling a lot. So I'm not sure we have to see. I mean, the fact that no one came until now, I think it doesn't mean it doesn't sign a problem between the U.S. and Israel. It just that's the way they act now. There are a lot of Zoom meetings or digital meetings between Israelis and Americans and the ambassador in the U.S. Gilad Erdan. Maybe some of you know him. He's doing his job as well. So when it comes to the question of is there a conversation? Yes, there is. But now that was the first visit, and so I just say very briefly, he met yesterday. Was it? Yes, it was yesterday. He met Prime Minister Netanyahu on Sunday. He met the Secretary. Benny Gantz, our Secretary of Defense. He went to Nevatim Air Base of the Air Force. Iron Dome and F-35. Generally speaking, it was a quite, I would say, quite quiet visit. It had no headlines. What attached me was the fact that he didn't mention the name of Iran. And Netanyahu gave his regular speech, I would say, about the danger from Iran. Benny Gantz as well, in his words, describes the problem with Iran. But Austin, from his, I don't know why reasons, didn't mention the country. Again, maybe we could, if you would like, we can discuss this point later. And that's if we discuss Israel, Iran, and the US and what's going on between. So I think those are the major developments of the last days. One word about the political crisis in Israel. If we go to the bottom line, I can't say there are any news. I mean, it's same deadlock. Everybody are talking more or less with everybody, or some are talking with some. Lapid was in the US, he came back. Bennett is talking to Netanyahu. There are some talks about negotiations, but bottom line, I see no path to anyone to have a government. And if we won't have, I don't know, a miracle or someone that will really compromise, we will go to fifth elections. Not so good news for Yom Ha'atzmaut, for the Independence Day. I think that in summary I will end with that, and we'll go to questions. Is that okay?
Sure. Terrific. What would be the interest in any one of the lead players in compromising at this point? What would be the interest in Gideon Sa'ar taking the position of president? Why would Naftali Bennett compromise? And if they would compromise, what would a compromise look like?
It's a very, maybe it's the question, Sarah.
It's the question.
I see, you probably. I see no compromise for now. Okay. There are many balloons in the air. Netanyahu is moving from being prime minister maybe to be a president, but with more authorities. Here in Israel, the president is it's only symbolic, actually. So maybe they will change the law and he will get some abilities. I don't know, probably in foreign affairs. I don't know in what. It's an idea. No one agreed to it, at least not publicly and officially until now. Some are saying there will be a rotation. Once again, I'm not sure if it will be Bennett first or maybe somebody else from the Likud first. So there is no any compromise. I can tell you that the sides are moving into it. Okay. Now, why would people compromise? Because if everyone, that's very clear. If everyone will stick to the promises they made before the elections, so we are going to fix elections. That's it. Okay. So I can tell you that although I'm as a journalist, I always push politicians to tell the truth and be faithful and so on. In this case, I'm tweeting, I don't know, at least mostly in the days after the election, I asked them to lie. I told them the one who will now and will not stick to his promises is my hero, because otherwise we won't have a government. So we have 3 weeks until Netanyahu's mandate from the president to build this coalition is ending. It's not a long time, since everything is so complicated. And any compromise that would be found, if at all, will be very complicated. So 3 weeks is not enough at all. But talks are going. Who knows?
If I may, because of your experience and time that you've spent with the prime minister, traveling with him, I would assume that you've developed somewhat of a relationship with him over time and have been able to see him in action and watch him throughout all of these numbers, not only these past 4 elections, but for many elections prior thereto throughout his political career. I'm trying to get, or we are all trying to get, everyone's trying to get into his head a little bit and try to see, we know what the compromises have to be from Sar or Bennett or Lapid or anyone else. But the question is, and you wrote a little bit about this in today's column, is there a compromise that Benjamin Netanyahu would be willing to make? Is there something that he would be willing to make? Can you help us get into his head and what he would be thinking moving forward to avoid a 5th election?
Let's go to the bottom line. I don't know. Okay, I don't know if he's ready to any compromise. I'll in a minute I'll talk about the article I wrote. I must say, I'm covering Netanyahu from close from 2009, and in my opinion, he is a great leader. Really, he's a giant. In my view, he is a giant. I mean, just the vaccines operation we had here in Israel, it's unbelievable. I mean, that's it. We have no pandemic here, okay? And that's the way we live. I think about a month now. It's and I know I follow news from all around the world. It's unbelievable. And he, in my view, is the only Israeli politician who could do that. That's it. And that's just one aspect. So he is a giant, and of course he's very smart person and very experienced. Now, he is motivated by feelings that he has to lead this country. That he could be businessman. I don't know. He could do many things. From very young age, he is dedicated and he's doing all what he can for this state, and he's completely sure. And so is his family that he has to lead the country. Now, Adam asked me about his mind. That's the way he thinks. That's the way he feels. It's clear to him, as you know, as the sun behind me now is shining. That's how it's clear to him that he has to lead the country. Now, you ask me if now, after 2.5 years of crisis, of endless crisis, and heading 5th elections, does he understand that maybe he should do a step? I don't know. What I can tell you is that I know people who talked to him and suggested him to make a step. And as you said, I today in my article, for the first time, I suggested that he will compromise, maybe become a president, maybe will become an alternative prime minister or deputy prime minister. Not from, in my view, I mean, Israel needs him. I mean, if he is still in the game, we're good. We need him. But the fact is, he has no 60. He doesn't have 61 seats and 61 supporters in the Knesset. So where are we going to now? His personnel didn't like this article at all. I'm sure they brought him this piece, and I must say, I mean, I don't feel. I feel. I mean, you just catch me in a very unique day. I mean, I'm not regular to raise a suggestion against Netanyahu. Okay, but I'm as a journalist, I feel I have to do my responsibility and look for a solution, and that's the idea I brought. I'm not the only one to bring it, and so, as we said, he's a very smart man, and I'm sure he's considering all options, but he is a person that's deciding in the last moment. So we will have to wait and see 3 weeks from now if he's gonna adopt any kind of compromise, or maybe I don't know, or maybe stick and go to 5th elections. I don't know. It's for him to decide.
Ariel, we haven't yet mentioned Mansour Abbas, the new kingmaker. So where does he stand? What is the view of Likud towards him, and what is the view of the anti-Bibi coalition?
Okay, so first of all, Mansour Abbas was hospitalized in the last days. So he gave no speeches. We didn't see him so much talking and so on. Now, I'm not sure if he is really still the kingmaker. Now, I know that Israeli media is talking a lot about having a government with either Mansour Abbas or the Joint Arab List. It depends on what is the direction of the government. I mean, if it's Lapid, so Lapid will go with Tibi and Ayman Uda from the Joint Arab List, and if it's Netanyahu, so we'll go with Mansour Abbas. My opinion about that is a little bit different. I think that even with Mansour Abbas or any Arab party, there is no path for no one. I mean, for Lapid as well to have a government. The way I know many Knesset members in the relevant parties, which are Yamina, Naftali Bennett, or New Hope, Tikva Hadasha of Gideon Sa'ar, those people are really right-wing persons, and they would not raise their hand for a government that is supported by actually terror supporters. Okay, some of them, not all of them, and I must emphasize it's Chas v'Chalila, it's not a question of because their nationality, because they're Arabs. That's not the point. 100% no. It's just because some of them, not all of them, but including Abbas, hugging terrorists. I mean, just a week ago, we had an event of a murder of soldier, an Israeli citizen, was released from jail after 37 years. And he, in the Metz, in Al-Fahim, there were celebrations of accepting him back to his home. But some officials from Mansour Abbas party came to hug him, physically to hug him, really. So I'm sure that, someone like Ayelet Shaked, or I don't know, Yoaz Handel, and maybe even Sa'ar himself, I can see such persons who are really right-wing ideologists. I'm sure they would not go to have a government with this kind of parties. If those parties will change and will announce tomorrow, we are 100% won't support in any way terror, and we are 100% against terror, 100%, and we support Israel as a Jewish state, which they're not saying, maybe things will change. But for now, bottom line, I don't think Abbas is a kingmaker. I think there is no realistic path. I know people are talking about it. My personal opinion is, again, it's not realistic.
Go ahead.
Ariel, we have a few questions from our participants this afternoon. Joey Bodner asks, do you think there are any potential compromises that will happen at the last minute to avoid a 5th election?
If there will be compromises, it will be in the last minute. That's Israeli politics for sure. But I'll tell you what, any compromise has to be prepared from before. It's not easy. It's going to be very complicated coalition agreements, and you have to prepare them with lawyers and so on. So maybe not in the last minute, but let's say in the last 3 days or so. But the problem again is whether there is a will by the players to compromise. And I'll add one factor we didn't mention, and that is that the fear from 5th elections is causing them not to compromise, because they are afraid the next election, people will tell them, hey, you lied. You said I will never cooperate with Lapid, and then you did try to cooperate with him. So the fear and that's just one example, of course. So the fear from 5th elections is another reason why we will go to 5th elections. We are in a loop.
That leaves one speechless. Let's turn to the situation with Iran. I won't ask you what our options are because you don't know, and if you did know, you won't say. But what can you tell us about what the government's thinking now that when we hear that they're enriching up to 60%, that's, to say it's significant is an understatement. To say it's existential.
Okay, so first of all, about the 60%, I wouldn't say now it's essential because again, as I said before, it really depends on the details. We don't know yet. I just before an hour I was talking to some expert I rely on, and he explained to me why it's very bad, those 60%, no doubt. Okay, and it's a real test for us, for Israel. It's a real test for the Americans. It's a real test for all the sides to the JCPOA. But for sure it takes us to the danger zone. But yet it's not that tomorrow they're going to have a bomb. Okay. Now, what I do want to say is that the way I analyze it is that you know, if you followed the news of the last days, from a reason I don't know what it is, Israeli officials leaked, as we mentioned in the beginning, to the New York Times and other outlets, that Israel is responsible to the attacks that took place against Iranian ship last week in Eritrea and in Natanz and so on. I don't get why those officials leaked the information. You know, the policy for many years is not to take responsibility in any way. Although everybody knows who did that or suspect who did that, we're never talking about it. So why the one who leaked it did that? I don't know. Some are saying it's because of political reasons here. There are many possibilities. I don't know. But according to what we know now, it looks like that because actually Israel almost said formally, Iran, we attacked you. That's the reason Iran reacted by saying, okay, we will enrich to 60%. And so I don't know why those who leaked the information, why they did it. What can we do? I'll tell you 2 points. First of all, Chief of Staff Aviv Kochavi, about 2 months ago, if I'm not wrong, said publicly, declared that he is ordering IDF, is ordering Tzal to prepare few options how to attack the Iranian nuclear facilities. I suppose it's not ready now. No, it takes some time, but people are preparing. And the second point, also by Kochavi, was said yesterday in a very again rare declaration. I can't remember when I heard such announcement. He said in a speech for the Memorial Days that a month from now, a huge training by Tzahal will take place. A training that will go for a month, and it's a training that immediately can be changed from a training to a real war.
Rational.
Now, usually Tzahal is saying the opposite. They're saying the training we're gonna do is not related to the reality, and it was prepared from a long time before. Kochavi said exactly the opposite. Not only is going to be a war train, it's a war training. It can be and immediately become a war. Things are going on. We don't know the entire picture, but it is very buzzing.
So if I can stay on the diplomatic track as well with respect to Iran, our President Jerry Platt asks a question with respect to understanding that the Abraham Accords are always in the background right now. The question is that Prime Minister Netanyahu right now has a very short window to make a proactive move toward Saudi Arabia and MBS. But he could give them more control of the Waqf, for example. Now we see that there are issues happening with Jordan and how horrible Jordan has been anyway in maintaining that, and perhaps that forcing or bringing about a Saudi connection, perhaps a normalization agreement sooner rather than later, will help with respect to Iran as well. Can you comment on those relationships?
Well, I would say that as an Israeli journalist, I'm really trying to be very careful when I criticize the US because I think as Israelis, we should never get involved in American politics or in other countries' politics. But when it comes to Israel, it's clear that the policy by Biden administration regarding to the question you raised, for example, Israel-Saudi is not positive because there is tension now between the US and Saudi. It caused MBS, let's say, to go a few steps back. So there is no atmosphere now for him, the way I understand it, because he's not backed by the US. When he did what he did, for example, meeting Netanyahu, he know the US is supporting that. Now it's completely different. And not only that, the US, lifted the sanctions from the Houthis in Yemen. The Yemens are attacking Saudi almost on a daily basis, shooting missiles on Riyadh. So they are in a very, very problematic, the Saudis in a very problematic situation. And we have to know there is a big difference between the Emirates and the people in the Emirates and what was going on in Saudi. Even if MBS and some of his advisors want ties with Israel, and I understand it's a positive direction, the Saudi people, as far as we can check and know, are still very, very hostile. I had personally a few experiences, I felt that, but we won't go into it now. But so, and I'm definitely not the only one to say that. In the Emirates, the public, it was prepared from years before, because MBZ, his ideas, is much more. The Emirates is an open country, not like Saudi. So altogether, I would be very, very surprised if we now see any breakthrough between Israel and Saudi. And again, the regional atmosphere, the way I understand it, is not ready for that.
Ariel, how does the overtures from the United States to Iran, how does that affect your opinion about a relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel? Because at the end of the day, it seems to me that Saudi Arabia and Israel are partners and they're allies. And the United States overtures to Iran have to be problematic to them.
Look, first of all, no question about that. The will by the administration to go work to the JCPOA, which Israel resists, the Saudis resist, all the region actually is against that. Okay, it pushes Israel and the neighbors one to each other. That's definitely correct. But the other steps that took place by the administration towards Saudi, they criticize, it's not my personal opinion, let's be clear about that, but, criticizing MBS for the murder of Khashoggi and actually legitimize Iran in one way or another, by lifting some sanctions, by going back to JCPOA, by lifting sanctions on the Houthis and so on. All that together is the atmosphere is not positive, and that's again an understatement. Okay, so it's definitely not positive, and we are now just the beginning of this administration. It's 3 months now, so I can't know where it's going to, but the administration has his views, his beliefs. I know they have many problems, but when it comes to the region, Israel, Saudi, and other countries, we just see it differently. We see it very, very, very differently. How to reach those problems. So I can't be optimistic about the ties between Israel and the US, or the ties between the Saudi and the US. I mean, I do hope it will be positive. And I must say that maybe as a lesson from Obama period, some of the officials like Blinken are really trying that the atmosphere, that at least, makes the atmosphere a little bit better. But there are huge policy differences. I mean, the Americans are sure that going back to the JCPOA is the best thing for them and for the entire world and for Israel. And that's the way to avoid Iran from rushing to a bomb. And here in Israel, everybody, including Ashkenazi and Gantz and Tzal and the Mossad, everybody are convinced the opposite. That if you go back to the JCPOA, you're legitimizing the nuclear program of Iran, and you give them money. You don't handle the missiles. You don't handle the terror. So, I mean, you can try to work about the atmosphere, but the policy differences are huge. So, it's a problem.
Ariel, in terms of policy, where do the Israeli Arabs stand on this issue? Because frankly, the bomb affects them in the same way that it affects us. And they're co-religionists, their families, so to speak, their extended family throughout the region. If you're Sunnis, as you just said, their position is the same as Israel. So where do the Israeli Arabs, or even the Arabs in the territories, where do they stand on the issue of Iran?
First of all, I must say I would not generalize the entire Arab population. It's very, very important. We just saw in the last elections, there are two parties, and both got enough support. They're in the Knesset, and there are differences between them. Generally speaking, I think the priorities of the Arab population are completely different. We have a huge, very, very big problem with violence in the Arab society here in Israel. Just yesterday, another woman was murdered, and really, it's a problem that of course we don't have a government. I don't know how can we end it, but it's very, very painful problem of some probably that's a priority number one when it comes to the Arab population in Israel. Now, there are some reasons to be optimistic because today took place for the first time a memorial ceremony by Arabs for Tzal, for Israelis and for Tzal soldiers who died during the wars. Okay. So again, it's the first time ever that Arabs are commemorating, remembering Tzal soldiers who died during the wars. So that's a reason to be optimistic. And so you can see it goes to so much different directions. Now, of course, in some of the society, they do support any kind of attacking Israel. Some of them are supportive of it. There's extreme parts of the society, but we are talking about almost 2 million people. Maybe it's not as bad as us as Jews. 2 million people is 4 million opinions, but it's very few developments to many directions, and I can't give you, a bottom line answer in this case.
Okay, Julio Messer asks the question. This is switching topics a little bit.
Julio, I remember you. I think we met a few years ago, many years ago, if I'm not wrong.
How do you read the events in Jordan since the Crown Prince decided not to visit the Temple Mount?
It's a very good question and sensitive one. And just a minute, forgive me, my kids. So it's a sensitive issue, and again, a very complicated one. I'm questioning myself, and I'm not sure I have an answer. Was the will by the Crown Prince, Prince Hussein, to come and visit Temple Mount, was it actually, is it related to what happened like 2 weeks ago with Prince Hamza. So I'm not sure, because we now it's clear to all of us that there are fights in the kingdom and in the palace actually. So I'm not sure. I'm not expert to give you a direct or clear answer how one is related to another. My understanding was that his will to come and pray in Temple Mount was supposed to be an action of showing that he's a leader. He gets a privilege and the honor to go there with a little army. That was the argument with Israel, the discussion with Israel, and probably it was intended to portray him as as the next leader. So the problem is that when it comes to Israel-Jordan ties, everything is very complicated. Just today, it was announced, or there was a report, that Netanyahu approved more Israeli water going to Jordan. They actually depend on our water, and they are depend on our security assistance, just as we depend on them. Okay, actually, when it comes to security, the cooperation is unbelievable. But the king Abdallah, he can show that. He cannot say, listen, we in Israel, we are really cooperating. We are doing a very, very good business together. He can say that. He can tell them that Jordan is dependent, again, water, security, and gas. All comes from Israel. Okay? I must say, again, we enjoy it as well. Don't get me wrong. We enjoy that, enjoy this cooperation as well. But he really depends on Israel when it comes to those major fields. But again, he can say that because of political reasons in Jordan, okay? Because the population is quite hostile. And if he will try to change the atmosphere, he will be attacked. So again, it's kind of a circle you can't break. So I can tell you that in Israel, we try somehow, all this package to handle it in the right way. It's not easy. And that's why you can see the tension from time to time goes out and publicly. Some of them tried to blame Israel or to pull us into the conspiracies that took this Hamza and so on, saying that Israel tried to get involved, in one way or another. So bottom line, Israel and Jordan ties is very, very sensitive and complicated. And last point about that, it tells me as an Israeli that, Israel supports the kingdom as it is, support King Abdallah. But the fact that things are so sensitive tells you that, maybe tomorrow, I don't know, things will change in Jordan. And that's a factor we have to remember.
So if I can jump in, going back to a quick question from Susan Cohn, is in the last few minutes that we have. Susan Cohn, one of our President Club members who down in Florida. There are conflicting reports about the length of time that the damage from the attack put Natanz out of commission. Some are saying 9 months, others a much shorter period. Can you give us an idea of which is more accurate? Is there anything that you can tell us about it?
Unfortunately not. I have no sources in Iran or in Natanz. I don't know, but I think what we do have to pay attention is that actually there is a war, a quiet war between Israel and Iran. This war is taking place in Iran itself. All the events and assassinations, bombs, etc. It takes place in Syria. It takes place in the Arab Gulf, the sea, okay, the Arab Sea, and it takes place even in the Red Sea, okay. So it's a war. It's a war, and it is an escalating war. That's what we have.
Adam, can I jump in and ask a question from the floor?
Yeah. please.
We have a question from Sam Solomon, who's here today with us, and he asks, can you explain why Amos Yadlin is what he's doing and saying? Yadlin seems to be more political than strategic, even as he accuses Bibi of the same thing and worse crimes. So what could you tell us about what he's saying and doing with regard to Bibi?
Sorry, who asked the question? Because
Sam Solomon has
question-
asked it, and the
Hey,
question.
Sam.
Sam
Okay.
Solomon.
Sam Solomon.
He
Okay,
asked,
so I'm just okay. I'm not sure what exactly you're pointing to.
Well, I believe Amos Yadlin recently also said something that you said similar to what you were saying earlier. You couldn't understand why the information about the attacks on Natanz and others were being leaked. And he suggested that Bibi was doing it only for political reasons, and that it should not have been leaked, and so on and so forth. But that might be the kettle calling itself, the pot black.
Okay.
So that's the question is about why he would be doing this.
Okay, I was replying with an answer because just yesterday, there is another issue with Yadlin because there is now a debate in the US, in the Senate, because Biden is trying to appoint, I think, the deputy or undersecretary for defense, which I know that Kufi and some other right-wing organizations are against, but Yadlin supported, so I was not sure what are you relating to. In any case, I think Yadlin is, generally speaking, he is professional. I don't see him as a political figure. I think in the second elections or so, he was joining the Labour Party, so it's quite clear that he is not from Netanyahu's lovers, I would say. But the way I follow his steps is usually he's professional, and in this case about the leaks, I'm raising the same. I don't have the answers as he does, but I'm raising the questions as well. It's very, very strange, and I don't know why we had those leaks. In my view, it caused damage, as I said before. But no. So and there are different opinions. We are, Baruch Hashem, we are an open society, and there are different opinions and because just last word about that. I mean, I do remember Yadlin as head of the intelligence in Israel under Netanyahu, cooperating with him very good. I remember interviews he gave me very short time after he retired from the army, saying that Israel can attack Iran. I think it was 2014, maybe 2015. So in some stages of the time, he definitely cooperated with Netanyahu. So yeah, he's a professional. Usually he's a professional.
yeah, Ariel, Sam would like you to consider, Sam Solomon, would you consider that the leaks are not coming from Bibi or not coming from the government, but they're coming from the US government? Would you consider that thought?
Look, of course so, but if I'm not wrong, the New York Times said the sources were Israelis. So, and not only that, Austin, as far as what I heard, that Austin here told reporters that not only they didn't leak it, they didn't know. Okay, they didn't know about Natanz. So you probably can't leak if you don't know, right?
So I want to thank you, Ariel, for taking the time. I know we are coming up on 6:45 here. The siren will sound here in Israel 8 o'clock as we begin our Yom HaZikaron commemorations. And I want to wish you and Sarah and everyone who was on this call a meaningful Yom HaZikaron and an even more joyous and hopeful Yom HaAtzmaut as we move into Israel's Independence Day. I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank you, Ariel. I want to thank you, Sarah. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today. We'll see you all next time. Everyone should stay safe, and we look forward to everyone being vaccinated and joining us here in Israel soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Laila Tov.